What's going on, folks? You let me know that another video regarding the upcoming Unearthed Arcana 5, which will be, as we know from the D&D Summit, the largest Unearthed Arcana we've received to date. Also, thank you for subscribing. By the way, if you haven't subscribed, consider doing so. A video dropped, and we know that the newest Unearthed Arcana will be releasing tomorrow. So be sure to, again, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications, and stay tuned here, as I will be doing what I typically do and live streaming a walkthrough of what's going on in that. It's going to be a long one because this is going to be the largest Unearthed Arcana we have to date. That being said, we do have a 12-minute video that was released today talking about that, so we're going to review it. And again, as I have been making sure I do disclaimers, when the videos are like sub 20 minutes, I will watch the video in its entirety without speeding things up. Usually if it's longer than that, I'll watch it on 1.5 or double time to allow me to get through it and not have the video end up being 40 minutes long. So let's go ahead and jump into our video. I think we might, we'll just keep it at, no, let's go 1.25 times speed. You might not even be able to tell the difference from what we've seen in some of these other videos.
Hello everyone, today we are talking about the Unearthed Arcana, which is about to drop. We are having a little bit of an overview video of what you can expect. There are a lot of very, very cool things in here. So what are some of the things that we are getting in this UA is, it's a big one.
It's not only a big one, it is the biggest one.
Right.
This is the biggest Unearthed Arcana we have ever done. And
it's almost a book.
or at least a large chunk of a book.
Right.
So this Unearthed Arcana is 50 pages long. And it
50 pages. This is going to be like a 4-hour live stream.
Has 5 classes. It has new spells. It has new feats. It has a revised rules glossary. And I saved it for last. What I consider to be sort of the star attraction of this Unearthed Arcana is the new weapon mastery system.
Again, if you've been following what's been going on with the Content Creator Summit, my video, several other folks' posts and transcripts, all of this should be pretty much just reiterating what was said at the summit. Again, we've already gotten 5 classes. So we got the Ranger, Rogue, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Paladin, and then that now leaves Barbarian, Fighter, Monk, Sorcerer, Warlock. Wizard? 5 classes? Shouldn't it be 6? Because there's 12 base classes? Wait a minute. Let's just talk through that again. The first one was Bard, Rogue, Ranger. Then we got Cleric. Then we got Druid and Paladin. Wait, count this one more time. Bard, Ranger, Rogue, Cleric, Druid, Paladin. That's 6. Now, he just said 5 more, which we know it's going to be the Warriors, right, for sure, which is going to be Barbarian, Fighter, Monk. That's a total of 9. And then you're going to get the Sorcerer, Warlock, I assume. And then that just leaves the Wizard. So maybe he meant to say 6, and it's actually going to be the Wizard? No, let's find out.
And that weapon system is a bit of a game changer, especially if you are a martial class.
So this weapon mastery system is our way of addressing the feedback we've received for many, many years, and that is, can we give characters who are focused on weapon use more to do tactically in battle? Also, as a part of that, how can we differentiate weapons from each other more so that when you go to choose a weapon, you really feel like that choice is meaningful? And so we were looking to address both of those desires. And we have been playtesting the system internally for a while now and having a ball with it. And we decided, okay, it's finally ready for us to share this with the broader D&D community to see what people think.
I think this is a really smart move, and I'm a fan of this. If you're unfamiliar, again, they're probably going to talk about it, but just high level, it's giving more versatility to the weapons that you use, and it allows the various, it sounds like it could be, I'm going to, give Jeremy a little bit of a better facial expression for the freeze frame there. But yeah, it gives you the option for more versatility. I'm wondering if the Battlemaster Fighter will even still exist as a subclass. or if we're gonna eventually like phase out the Battle Master fighter in favor of these new Weapon Master rules. And it'll give you a little bit more things you can do tactically, which I like, but more importantly, a lot of the time it didn't really matter what weapon you chose, whether you decided to use a Morning Star, a sword, a battle axe, what have you. They were all going to do the same amount of damage, a d8, and then some of them that have versatile, you could use them two-handed for a d10. But ultimately, it was purely aesthetics to you. It didn't matter which one you took, and it also didn't matter what you brought with you, right? Sometimes I know that some folks would prefer to have different weapons. Like, okay, I carry an axe and a sword and maybe some other weapon. And like in theory, in the real world and possibly in your own headcanon, it would make sense to do that. Because like, okay, I'm going to fight this thing. It makes more sense for me to have a mace or a Morning Star. Or, oh, it makes more sense to have an axe than a sword or what have you, right? And what this is going to allow is with the way the new weapon properties work, there's a reason why you might want to bring with you a sword and an axe, or a great sword and a maul, or things like that.
What this system does is it allows members of certain classes, and in this Unearthed Arcana, people will see it's the fighter and the barbarian, and then in future Unearthed Arcanas, you'll see the monk and others also delving into weapon mastery.
So just fighter, barbarian.
Fighter and the barbarian are the first ones out of the gate who get to play with this new system. What weapon mastery does, it's a feature that fighters and barbarians now get. It unlocks a new property that is in each weapon. So every weapon in the 2014 Player's Handbook now has an additional special property. It's called a mastery property, and the only way to access that property on the weapon is if you have a class feature or a feat, because also...
Do you guys hear like external laughter in the background that's like coming through into their room?
In this Unearthed Arcana, we give you a feat that unlocks weapon mastery. You need some way to unlock that feature. It represents a character's, as it's in the name, mastery of the weapon. They're able to do a little something extra with it. So then that, of course, begs the question, what are these things?
Yeah.
So these properties are things like topple, which allow the weapon to knock a person prone. Cleave, which allows you to swipe from one target into another target. Graze, which allows you to do a little bit of damage even if the attack roll missed. And some of these work only for melee weapons, like Graze only works on melee weapons, but then others are also available for ranged weapons. We have Slow, which when the target is hit, their speed is reduced. A number of our ranged weapons now have this, which gives you some really interesting tactical options as you look to control the battlefield. There's Flex, which is a mastery property that allows a person using a versatile weapon to deal the versatile damage even when you're wielding the weapon one-handed.
Right.
This will be especially powerful for characters who like a sort of classic sword and board combo, because suddenly you're able to have your shield and deal the weapon's higher damage without giving up your shield.
Now, I really like this. I like the concept. I mean, I like rolling d8s. D8s may be my favorite die, period. But this would allow you to roll with d10s, which would be something new and unique for a lot of folks wielding, again, sword and board, sword and axe, whatever. Or axe and shield, rather. Axe and board. Wow, that was a horrible... Whatever, you know what I mean. And, yeah, I interesting that it will just be the fighter and barbarian, and then in the future we'll see things like the monk and the rogue getting access to this. But also potentially, I think he said there will be a feat that will allow you to unlock weapon mastery, so perhaps you might be able to get access to these on other classes. I don't know if a feat is the only way to get it. This might be something that's reserved more for like the martial type characters, so perhaps the paladin and the ranger, because they're able to take feats as though they are a warrior class, will allow them to get access to them as well. This could be really, really interesting. And it adds another level of uniqueness and a level of versatility to, again, not to all classes, right? Some classes, like the Paladin, for example, do have a lot of versatility to them. But some, like the Barbarian or the Fighter, might not have a lot of unique things they can do. And, like, whereas they can hit with a weapon, sure, but like a wizard casting a cantrip like Ray of Frost can slow, or Eldritch Blast from or Eldritch Blast could do a push or a pull, and all sorts of these different things. So, I don't know.
These options, what we have found in our playtesting, give you fascinating round-by-round tactical options if you're playing a character who gets to play around with these new weapon capabilities. Now, the fighter then gets to go even further. So the fighter, in addition to having access to these new weapon mastery properties, is able to also, at higher level, change the property
Right.
on particular weapons. And then at even higher level, the fighter can put two of these properties on a particular weapon and then decide which one activates when the fighter attacks.
Now, this again was covered and what we heard at the summit, and it was in my other video on it. But if you missed that, that's some pretty cool versatility that gives the fighter, which, you know, the fighter, in my opinion, in the 2014 rules was largely defined by the subclass. They didn't have a lot of base identity, right? You had Action Surge, which is very powerful, and the only kind of thing that changes is you get more uses of it as you level up. You get things like, you know, a couple of extra ability score improvements, which are nice, but they're potentially possibly passive. And the other main thing was the more attacks, which again, all very cool. And until you hit level 11, the number of attacks you have minus Action Surge are about the same as every other martial character, or less than the monk potentially, because the monk could do that a lot more frequently with things like Flurry of Blows. But this is nice because I assume that this is going to be tied to the base fighter class, which means they're going to get other cool, unique abilities as they level up, separate from just the subclass, which again gives them a little more unique stuff as they level up, rather than a very kind of bland. And again, if you pick a more simplistic subclass, like say the champion, you are kind of, you know, it's good. No one can argue that a champion fighter isn't good. It's just not particularly flashy or giving you a lot to do or unique abilities. Whereas these just in and of themselves add a whole lot more, even if you just kept the existing classes as they were.
So this is all a part of us really leaning into the fighter's identity as the master of all.
Oh, there it is.
Fighters have always, in 5th edition, had access to every weapon in the player's handbook. And we wanted to make sure that they, when they interact with the weapon mastery system, they are the best at it. Now that said, the barbarian is still going to have a ball with this system, but just doesn't have the same customization options that the fighter has.
Right.
I'm fine
The
with that.
barbarian has rage and other goodies
Yeah.
instead,
Yep.
but the fighter is going to be able to customize their experience at higher level to create a tactical mix that the class has never had before. I personally have been playing a fighter in our internal playtests, and probably have had the most fun I've ever had playing a fighter in D&D.
So with warriors having these new things that they can do with weapons, this is also like very cinematic. I know it's like there's a lot of fun to be had like mechanically, but this is also extremely cinematic combat.
Absolutely. There are options also like push. Some weapons have the push property where when you hit, then you can hurl the person back. So you're going to be able to create these cinematic action scenes like never before. And that we have found in our internal playtests transforms how the fighter and the barbarian feel round to round.
Now, the other thing that we don't know at this point, and I'm assuming I know the answer, but I assume that these require no action economy to do. It's just a thing that happens. When you unlock weapon mastery and you have a maul, and let's say, you know, two-handed maul is a push feature, and you hit somebody with them, I also hope it's not an always-on thing. It's not like I hit them and I have to push them back 5 or 10 feet. It's I hit them, and because I am truly a master of that weapon, I can choose to knock them back 10 feet, or I could choose not to knock them back 10 feet. But it doesn't require me to spend a bonus action, a reaction, or anything like that. It's just a function of the weapon and happens kind of outside of action economy.
Giving them an excitement, a tactical texture, also a pursuit of different weapons that is very meaningful, because now you might pursue having a particular weapon because of the mastery property that it has. Because you might decide, oh, I want a push weapon in my mix. I want a topple weapon in my mix. I want a vex weapon in my mix. Vex is another property that is available here. And so it's going to
I don't remember what that one does.
Your weapon shopping, your decisions round by round, all of that, a whole new dimension if you are playing a character who's all about the weapons that you use. Now, with the feat that we have in this Unearthed Arcana, we've also made it so that non-warriors can dip their toe into the weapon mastery
Okay,
pool
there it is.
with that feat. In a way, you can think of the weapon master feat in this playtest as the weapon mastery equivalent of the magical initiate feat that we have in the player's handbook for people to get a little bit of spell casting.
That we always talk about how Weapon Master, as it exists in the 2014 Player's Handbook, is one of the worst, if not the worst, feat in existence. Found a way to fix it. That's great, and I like that you have Magic Initiate, which gives you some spell casting, and Weapon Mastery, which gives you some martial. And you have those two options. I think that's actually really good. And if they do end up deciding to have some sort of like magic adept or something, where it's like the next level down the road that gives you a little bit more magic, I hope that they also do something similar with like martial. Call this one martial initiate and then martial adept or whatever you want to do. And it's like a little bit more martial stuff if you want to focus in it. Or if you're a class that maybe doesn't have access to it, or you're a monk and you really want to focus on a specific weapon type. They may say it, I haven't watched the whole video yet, but I also think it would be interesting to provide them with an improvised weapon option. Now, perhaps that's a subclass feature. That could be a really awesome, if you're listening, WotC, I'm throwing it out there for free, a subclass feature of something like, say, a Drunken Master Monk option could be like they get proficiency, whether or not you have proficiency with improvised weapons or not, but they get it, and then they also unlock the certain weapon mastery feature for improvised weapons, but that would be a cool option. I also am a little bummed because we saw the list in the summit, and I referenced it in my other video. It does not look like they are adding any additional weapons beyond what was contained in the 2014 Player's Handbook. We might see tomorrow that they have added something. There have been some tweaks. We do know that like pistols and muskets, for example, have made an appearance and they'll be in the base Player's Handbook. But I'm a little bummed if there are no new unique weapons archetypes. There are still some out there that we don't have a weapon that fits. For example, maybe that'll change, but we have like a D12 slashing weapon in the Great Axe, and I think we have a D12 piercing weapon in the Lance, but we don't have a D12 bludgeoning weapon, for example. Maybe the Great Club will now do a D12, and that solves that. But there were certain little like niche options that were like, we have like a versatile slashing weapon? Do we have a versatile piercing weapon, a versatile bludgeoning weapon? Things like that, where you can kind of have things that fill all the gaps so you have a little bit of something for everyone. And I think that would be a really cool concept. And someone's going to ask it, so I'll cut it and nip it in the bud here. Shield weapon mastery. People want to hit people with shields, whether it's just like a shield bash attack or full-on Captain America shield throwing. People want that. And it would be really cool to see shield mastery. Now, I will point out, we have not heard a single thing about armor. This has solely been focused on weapons. So perhaps there will be additional kinds of armor, additional kinds of shields, and maybe there will be armor mastery feats down the road or things like that will allow you to do different stuff. But that's something I think they should also think about.
Especially if you are, say, Pact of the Blade Warlock. You might want to be a little bit better with your blade.
So before we dive into the Warlock, a couple other things about weapons. People are also going to see in this Unearthed Arcana that we have retuned a few weapons in addition to the application of the mastery system to these weapons. So for example, you're going to see that tridents have had their damage adjusted so that they are now actually different from spears. The lance has been adjusted. War pick has been adjusted.
Okay, so maybe this is what I was talking about.
The short sword has now returned to being a martial weapon because given all the changes we've made, we've found it's no longer necessary for the short sword to be a simple weapon, so it's gone back to being a martial weapon. There's more. In the Unearthed Arcana, you're going to find that we now have design notes that summarize the most important updates, not only for weapons, but for everything that's in the Unearthed Arcana. So you're going to find a list of what are the main updates to weapons, what are the main updates to each of the 5 classes, and then even within those classes, what are the main updates to the subclass that's provided with the class.
Makes my TLDR video a lot easier.
and so on and so forth.
That's a great thing for like the overview of all of this is, yeah, I was looking at this UA and you see all these design notes and you are literally guiding people as to how this is 5th edition, how this is like compatible with the 2014 Player's Handbook and the new Player's Handbook. Like,
Well, and these notes provide kind of a map for you to see, okay, what's different from the 2014 Player's Handbook, and then whatever ends up getting adopted from the playtest and making it into the 2024 Player's Handbook will then go through, in our development process, a compatibility check, because we will then, as we finalize, ensure that the new material works with your 5th edition books that you already have. Now, people might be wondering, how can you change?
Oh, hang on. I gotta
still work with a compatible.
I gotta hear that again. Sorry, I got a text. I was just checking it. Let's hear that again.
Whatever ends up getting adopted from the playtest and making it into the 2024 Player's Handbook will then go through, in our development process, a compatibility check, because we will then, as we finalize, ensure that the new material works with your 5th edition books that you already have.
Okay.
Now, people.
That may be why we're not getting a lot of new weapons and armor. And that's unfortunate, in my opinion, because this is still 5th edition, even though people are likely going to call it 5.5, Advanced 5e, 5R, whatever they're going to call it. They can't change too much because it still needs to be backwards compatible. And regardless of whether you feel like it will be truly backwards compatible, it does seem like they are doing their best to make sure that it actually is, in fact, backwards compatible as much as it can be. That may be why we're not seeing unique weapon types being added or massive new types of armor. I hope that's not the case, and like they're not going to limit themselves by backwards compatibility being the factor, but who knows?
People might be wondering, how can you change a class dramatically and it still work with the books that are already in print? Here's how. We have designed all of the adventures for 5th edition so that the adventures actually are not aware of how a class functions on the inside.
Well, that's very apparent by how sometimes some classes can just steamroll right over pre-written encounters, but either way.
Class in 5th edition is a piece of content. It's not a piece of the system. And so as long as we have maintained the system and continue to maintain it in the 2024 rulebooks, you will be able to use new content options with the books you already have. We will delve more into that the closer we get to the release of those books.
Okay.
The reason why it's not a focus in our conversations right now is first we need to see in the playtest process which new options are delighting people and are actually going to make it into the new rule books. And then we will make sure, all right, in how the final implementation is realized, we will then ensure that compatibility is protected. And then once we're there, I'm sure you and I will have an entire video or several videos about here's how these puzzle pieces are going to snap together for you. But in the meantime, these design notes are a great way to sort of have a little map of the territory and see, okay, here are the main things that are different between this playtest version and the 2014 version of the same game element.
Yeah, I very much like the inclusion of those design notes. Those are fantastic.
They are helpful even for us in our design process. And we had basically this sort of equivalent of this kind of notation internally. And with this UA, particularly given how big it is, we realized, okay, we need to provide some of this mapping in the Unearthed Arcana itself, and we will continue to do so in the future UAs that are in this series.
All right. So again, for those of you who followed the summit, whether live tweets, transcripts, videos, etc., a lot of that seemed relatively redundant to you. We'll get to see what it actually looks like on paper. Now, I don't remember looking through and seeing what was on screen. They talked about retooling some of the things. I know, again, they mentioned the trident was a good example, right? Which didn't make a lot of sense to me, how a spear is like a singular point and it did a d6 damage, and a trident had 3 points and it did the same amount. Makes more sense that a trident, I think, now does a d8 damage, given the fact that it's literally a spear times 3. A lot of people were saying it should do 3d4 or 3d6, but I think that's fine, just a slight update. I hope we see things, again, to kind of fill the gaps. Now, again, maybe they'll just fill those gaps that I had mentioned by retooling some of the weapons that already exist to fit those gaps. I also would love to see new weapons, just because, let's be honest, right? we've been looking at the same weapons from 2014 for just shy of 10 years. And one thing that I often personally enjoyed from older editions was as new books would come out, new weapon types would come out. And that was some of some of my favorite things that we've received in terms of new content with updated books here and there was new mundane equipment. The inclusion of the Yikilwa in Tomb of Annihilation, a simple throwing but also melee weapon. The double-bladed scimitar from the Elves of Eberron. The hoopak from Dragonlance. The sort of, I forget the name of it, the kind of linen heavy cloak or coat that is basically armor for those without armor proficiencies found in Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. There's a lot of really cool things like that, these new mundane things, and I often get more excited about those than I do about new magical items. So I would love to see an inclusion of more or new content like that. Again, maybe that's outside of the scope of this particular Unearthed Arcana, and we could get more in the future. Perhaps filling out surveys, we may be able to make those adjustments. And then again, I would also love to see a similar treatment to armor, especially with the removal of some things that were kind of pointless, like padded armor and leather armor were fundamentally the same. I understand there's the potential of just purely the aesthetics, but if you're just going to look at the aesthetic of an armor and one's mechanically worse in every way or mechanically identical in every way, why even bother having that? Why not just say like leather or padded armor and have like that's what the type is and it does one thing? And adding new types, possibly the concept of magical materials. Again, I believe things like mithril materials were something that was included in the 3.5 player's handbook. Like you'd look at it and it would be like, okay, if you get it made out of mithril, it does X, Y, Z to it. Whereas opposed, again, maybe that's outside of the scope of the player's handbook and more of a, but that was a material, not necessarily a magic item. But it seems like 5e treats that more as a magic item and less as a material. Again, maybe I know that's probably well outside of the scope of what this video actually, or this Unearthed Arcana will actually be. But this is exciting stuff. It seems like they're doing a lot to try to at least add some more complexity to fighters, which was one of my biggest holdouts to not ever truly play what I consider a traditionally martial class. I have played monks a few times, but the monks that I played, their subclasses gave them so much more versatility in the things that they could do. I didn't really feel like I was truly a martial character. Whereas I've never played a fighter, and I feel like that's because I would just get bored, or I would rather play a paladin who has magic and other unique abilities, auras and whatnot, on top of just the ability to hit really hard with a sword. So let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I will be doing a live stream covering this when it goes live tomorrow. I will see you all next time.